Alabama's new immigration law, recently upheld by a federal judge, is now starting to have an economic impact in the state. Representatives of the agricultural and construction industries say they are losing a significant portion of their workforce. And it's against that backdrop that the state's Hispanic community is voicing opposition. The Mi Pueblo supermarket in Birmingham closed its doors yesterday, joining Hispanic-owned businesses across Alabama to take a stand against the state's tough new immigration law.
We, all the Hispanics, we should be together to represent, how we feel to the state about it.
The work stoppage also hit the poultry industry. The parking lot was almost empty at a Tyson Foods chicken plant in tiny Albertville in northeastern Alabama. Operations slowed or even stopped as many Hispanic employees staged a one-day sick-out.
Hey, Bill 56!
It was the latest and perhaps largest protest against the law known as HB 56, passed earlier this year. One key provision authorizes police to detain anyone who is suspected of being in the country illegally. Supporters say it's intended to help legal residents by pushing illegal immigrants out of the workforce.
There is illegal, and they are getting most of the jobs that we need right now.
2 weeks ago, a federal judge in Alabama upheld the law's main provisions. The state's Republican governor, Robert Bentley, welcomed the decision.
It would not have been necessary to address this problem if the federal government would have done its job and enforced the laws dealing with this problem.
But since then, some local officials have warned that thousands of children here legally could be left in limbo.
The worst case scenario for us would be if we had a large number of children who were suddenly dependent and had no relatives who were able and willing to take care of them. And that possibly could happen if the parents were arrested or deported suddenly.
Schools are also voicing concerns. They're now required to check the immigration status of prospective students. And already absentee rates are rising among Hispanic students. In the meantime, the Mexican consulate in Huntsville has sent out a team to help families get documents they need to return to Mexico if needed. We talk now with Jerry Spencer. He's founder of the Birmingham-based Grow Alabama, which delivers locally grown produce in the state. Jerry Spencer, thank you for joining us. I understand you work with 200 to 300 farmers in the state. What do they grow and what's happened to their workers in the last few weeks?
Well, our farmers grow a broad range of various fruits and vegetables. Some of them are large enough to be pretty heavily impacted by the loss of their Hispanic workers. I found this out a couple of weeks ago, Friday after the decision was made, the law was enacted, and called around to 3 of my farmers, and that was enough for me to know that there was a serious impact going on. So I slept on it overnight and put it on Facebook and started getting a force, mobilizing a force for the farmers to replace what they'd lost, the workers that they had lost. Many of them were, yeah.
I was just going to ask, how many altogether have left, and why did they say they were leaving?
Well, the only figures I've seen are state figures, which are about 185,000. And the reason for them leaving was the fear of incarceration, arrest, hassle from the police, which they have been given the right to do.
And what sort of work were these laborers doing, the ones who left? Where are you now in the crop, the harvesting cycle? How urgent is it that they be replaced?
Well, the urgency is in the final stages of the last harvest of the year, essentially. So the urgency, there'll be a significant loss of harvest in the next few weeks, but the the big concern is the decisions that the farmers are going to have to make about whether they continue to farm next year.
Are replacement workers available? I mean, we know that some of the state representatives, including the one we're about to talk to, is saying that there are other folks in Alabama who are unemployed who would love to take these jobs.
There are plenty of those folks, and that's who we are trying to mobilize. We're starting at a very small, on a very small basis, 40, 50 people last week, and we're looking at the details of what's necessary, transportation, the workability of these unemployed city folk working on farms. So we're looking at all of that. Out of 40, 50, 60 people, we probably have maybe 10 people who really could actually work on a farm.
So bottom line, these workers can be replaced.
It's not impossible.
All right. Well, we will leave it there, Jerry Spencer, and we appreciate your joining us. And we want to talk now a little bit more about the impact of the Alabama law, and we want to turn to State Representative Mike Ball of Huntsville, Alabama, who supports the law. He joins us from Knoxville, Tennessee, and Rosa Toussaint Ortiz. She's chairwoman of the Hispanic Latino Advisory Committee in Huntsville, and she joins us from there. Let me start with you, Representative Ball. We heard not only from Mr. Spencer, we talked today with a contractor in the state who is concerned about people leaving these jobs. Was that the consequence you expected when the law was passed?
Yes, I think so. I think that was the purpose of the law, was to discourage those who are here in Alabama illegally. We have a huge poverty problem in Alabama. We have a problem with unemployment, and many of the folks that come to Alabama illegally, they have a different set of rules that they're hired by. They don't have to have workman's comp insurance. They don't have to have employee tax. A lot of them are paid 1099 or paid under the table. So it puts our working, undereducated, the very people that's having a problem with unemployment, it puts them at a competitive disadvantage. And we need a level playing field.
Ms. Toussaint Ortiz, how do you see the effect the law is having?
What I see is, I understand what they are saying in reference to the jobs, and the ones they are already citizens, they need those jobs. But what I don't understand is, how do we decide to make a decision, a law so harsh that has put all these people in a crisis? It's a chaos here. We are dealing with human beings. It doesn't matter if they are legal or illegal. Even if they were going to pass that law, they should have gave the people time to process all these changes. What we have created now is chaos, crisis, misunderstanding. The police not sure what's going on, what they should be doing. The Department of Motor Vehicle is not completely sure. The people themselves are completely confused, because what happens is the language barrier has caused rumors. So people are going by rumors. People don't have the clear information, and they are just completely afraid.
So
children are seeing this.
I was just going to say, let me turn back to Representative Ball and ask you about her description of a crisis. She said people don't know where to turn. There's a language barrier, and there's just a lot of confusion.
Well, first of all, this bill was passed during the last session of the legislature months ago, and it only just now took effect. As a matter of fact, during the whole campaign season, this was something that was talked about. There is certainly a lot of confusion about the law. I think a lot of the opponents of the law have fueled a lot of fear in. I mean, some of the things that they've said the law does, it really doesn't do. There's no reason for somebody be afraid of this law to keep their child out of school. The provisions that are apply to schools are merely statistical counting. So, but then you know, people. There are folks that are fueling the fear, and quite frankly, if you're here illegally, you probably should be afraid that you could get in trouble. That's why you make things illegal.
Ms. Toussaint Ortiz, what about that basic point that if people are here illegally, then they shouldn't expect to stay?
Well, the first thing is we should not dehumanize. What I'm seeing is if they are illegal, they should have received time to make the decision of moving out of the state. You cannot, right now, we have, and you know, let me tell you what really upsets me. When we get tornadoes, and this has been like a tornado for the undocumented community, we see the counselors, pastors, they go to the school to help the children. There has been kindergarten classes, like in Albertville, the 20 children disappear in one minute. And no one, what I find outrageous is that this is going on, people see the news, and it's like the community, the U.S. citizens, they are like numb. They're not doing anything to help. And you mentioned before the consulate, the Mexican consulate has been here yesterday, today, and they were supposed to be here tomorrow. Now, the church, they allow us to stay there. They just cancel on us without giving us a good reason. And all these people, we got about 300 and some people coming tomorrow that they're not going to be able to serve. Because now we don't have a place.
Just finally, one quick final word from Representative Ball. Is there going to be an attempt to clarify this situation for them?
Well, quite frankly, as far as the people that are here illegally, if they're here legally, they have no problem, nothing to be concerned about. If they're here illegally, then there are some measures in this law that would that would make it rough on them. I mean, because I don't mean make it rough. I mean, they could be arrested.
Well, we will have to leave it there. We want to thank you, Representative Mike Ball from the state of Alabama, and Rosa Toussaint Ortiz. We appreciate both of you joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.